Thank you, everyone. So my name is Lloyd Bastani, and I'd like to thank Genie and Bracklet, our sponsors, and Codesmith for hosting us this afternoon. So today I'm going to be talking to you guys about UX, UI, and development, and how all of those intersect. So a little agenda for today. So what are UX and UI design? Why are they important? And the design dev workflow. So UX and UI are often lobbed into the same category. They are related and they complement each other, but they're not exactly the same thing. So user experience is mainly concerned with creating a seamless and intuitive interaction with a product or service based upon user needs, frustrations, preferences, behaviors that's informed by user data. One of the biggest core rules of user experience is that you are designing for the users and not yourself. So I have put little sparkly stars on that because that is extremely important and it's going to come up consistently. So always design for the user and not for yourself. UI, on the other hand, or user interface, is all about turning schematics and ideas into functional tools, usually aesthetically pleasing ones. So if UX is the paintbrush, UI is the canvas. So a little example of how UX and UI come together. So if you're thinking of eating a bowl of cereal as the user experience that a user is having, the contents would be the pieces of cereal themselves and the milk, and then the user interface would be the spoon. And the actual experience of someone eating that bowl of cereal is the user experience. So we can think of this in terms of what we actually care about, although for those of you who like cereal, not knocking on that. But in terms of web development, so when the user interface is how a user interacts with the contents of a page, and then the contents is the actual elements of that page itself, and the user experience is the user journey through using that page or application. So one thing to note that I'll be talking about pretty consistently is the concept of fidelity. So on the left side, you have low fidelity mockups. So these are designs that user experience or UX designers often create to just get the bare bones functionality that they can use for testing and research. Meanwhile, on the right side, which user interface or UI designers usually do, is they create high fidelity mockups. These actually look pretty darn close to what the developers actually build. So every little thing down to a hover animation matters. So if you present a design to a stakeholder, so a UX or UI designer presents something that they want to test with either stakeholders in their company or a testing audience, and that tester has to pause and think for more than 5 seconds about what to do next on the page, that designer is likely going to have to go back to the drawing board. So once again, always be thinking of the user and not yourself. So Don't Make Me Think, Big Tenant, and a lovely book for those of you who are interested in reading it. So they're concerned with things like space, so not having cramped elements, contrast, having like primary colors and primary buttons, hierarchy, so H1s and primary elements on the page, and then also things like proportion and balance, so making sure your elements are spaced out evenly across your page. And then lastly, repetition. The dry principle also exists in UX and UI. You don't want to have repetitive elements just scattered across your page. You want things to be unique, so your user has a well-rounded experience. So what makes a good user experience? You may have wondered why I have cups up here with me. So the 3 tenets of a good UX are usefulness, usability, and desirability. So here we have 2 cups. They have the same use. You can both drink coffee, tea, what have you out of them. And usability, this is where things start to sort of differ. So this cup, you can't actually stick all 4 fingers in. It's a little awkward. Meanwhile, this cup, you can actually get all of your hands around. This is going to make for a nicer experience. And then comes desirability. Would you rather have this one sitting on your shelf, or would you rather have this one? You're going to go with the sexier option, which I hope you choose this one. So why is this important? So having more desirable user experience, or just a better user experience in general, that's going to lead to more user engagement, which ultimately leads to more money. So companies from small businesses all the way to large corporations, Fortune 500 companies, they're investing tons and tons of money into UX design. Some companies even go so far as to have their own design systems. So I'm going to show you one of those. So this is Goldman Sachs's design system. So they have an entire design system that you can look and see the components themselves. You can see they have everything from graphs all the way down to buttons, forms. They've invested millions of dollars in a design system that, unfortunately, if you were to click on one of them, it's only available to view in Figma in-house only. So I unfortunately cannot show you what Goldman Sachs has running under the hood, but this just goes to show that companies are investing tons and tons of money in having a good user experience and user experience design. One thing I will show you though is when a user experience or user interface designer sends something for the developer to work on, they'll likely be sending you something in Figma. So this is a high fidelity mockup. And as you can see, if I was to click on a button over here, this is going to show the CSS and styling. It's hard to see, not zoomed in, but it will give you everything you need to know as a developer, how to actually build out the thing that the designer has intended. So when I was first, thinking about, okay, what is it actually going to be like to work in the field and have UX and UI designers telling me what to do and what I need to build, I was like, wow, how am I gonna get their things to a T? But luckily, they provide a lot of the things for you. So if you are uncomfortable with styling in CSS, you will be getting a cheat sheet. So that's good to know. So why is this important for developers? So first would be satisfaction. So you all want to create things that you are proud of and that your users are going to enjoy using. Once again, this user focus comes into play. If you design for yourself and how you like to see something and not based on the data that the designers give you, you are probably going to have to go back to the drawing board and it's going to just waste your time in general. Last but not least, with opportunities and workplace culture, if you know a little bit about what UX and UI designers do and how they approach problems and solving problems, it's going to make it a lot easier for you as developers to sort of interact with them and just have a better work experience in the workplace. So I'm going to then go into each of these steps of the workflow of actually what happens when designers and developers are working together to build a product. So the first step is to discover. So this is where discovery and research takes place. This is where designers are conducting user interviews, making competitor analysis, anything they need to understand the core user needs and wants of the specific product that they want to create. Is this a problem worth solving? Sometimes designers will go down that route and say, okay, we want to make an app that does X functionality. And they'll go through the entire discovery process and realize, you know what, this isn't something that's actually worth delving into. But some of the user feedback that they get along the way might actually inform a product or feature that they do want to design. It's also important to ask questions. So this is where the designer and developer conversation is going to begin. This is where the teams are going to start to work together. It's always important to just consistently ask questions just to save everybody time. So define, this is where the designers come up with a core problem that is worth solving. They decide on this is what we're going to do. This is the ideation phase, which all of you have familiarity with or will soon have familiarity with. Once again, this is where the low fidelity mockups are created and these things that are called wireframes. And this is just going to define the problem and give the developers a heads up, like this is what you're going to be working on. Coding does not happen yet at this point. Then there's a testing phase. So testing pure functionality of the product. So using those wireframe mockups, test audiences will be brought in to sort of let people know, give feedback of, is this something that we're enjoying using before all of the work is put into the high fidelity and actual coding. So additional data is collected to inform future iterations on the solution to the problem. And at this point, maybe the designers are uncovering some things. Maybe there's a feature that they've uncovered based on user feedback. They're going to then give the developer team a heads up and say, okay, there's this other feature that you guys are going to have to work on, just a heads up. Then there's the actual design. This is where the high-fidelity mockups are handed off to developers. This is where developers are given an MVP with a time frame to complete it. And like I said, high-fidelity tools using Figma. So this is probably what you as a developer is going to be given. Then there's a recap. So after that handoff, developers will be like, do you have any questions about what you have to build? Maintaining an agile workflow over the waterfall approach is definitely the way to go. Companies usually will have an agile workflow in place, like using things like Scrum, Trello boards. But throughout the entire process, make sure you're asking questions. One thing to note, though, if you are a developer and you have a disagreement with what the UX and UI designers have told you to carry out, might be better to, since they put all of the work into like research and saying, users are going to engage with this better. If you want to challenge that, make sure you come to the table with data. Otherwise, they're going to show you the door and say, you know what, this isn't your purview. Then there's the development phase. This is where you all come in. So coding will commence. This is very self-explanatory, but yeah. Then there's the delivery of the final product. So the product is shipped, beta testing happens, and then the process rinses and repeats. So one thing, I did interview some UX designers working in the field, or UX and UI designers working in the field right now, and they have the following suggestions to all of you as developers as you go into your careers. So be communicative and transparent. So if you have a certain way that you like to do things, do you want to be slacked? Do you want to be left alone, like off on your own? Do you prefer to have a lot more, do you want a more fleshed out Figma page, or are you a front-end wizard and you can just take care of things without much direction? Sort of let them know that. Also define system constraints. If you're working with a legacy code base, it's very important, if you've been given a feature that you think isn't feasible, let the design team know that as soon as possible, just to save everybody time. This one, estimate how long it's going to take you to do something. They would prefer that you do this. Granted, we all know that bugs happen, so definitely give a little bit longer than you think it's going to take, just in case. And lastly, be able to accept constructive feedback. But that's something that I know all of you are rather experienced with, so I don't need to delve too much into that. But other than that, that is the end of my presentation. Here are the references that I used. And if you'd like to continue a conversation, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or GitHub.